My uncle announced at the family reunion, standing under the old oak trees where my grandmother used to serve lemonade every summer. "I'm selling your grandmother's farm. You kids don't deserve it." Everyone nodded except me. The words hit me like a punch to the gut as I watched my family murmur their agreement, acting like this sprawling 200-acre piece of our history meant nothing more than a bank transaction. I asked, feeling my heart pound in my chest, "Did you check who's listed on the current deed?" Uncle Greg laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Of course, it's in my name." I handed him the county records I'd printed that morning. It wasn't. The color drained from Uncle Greg's face as he stared at the paperwork in his trembling hands. Around us, the family reunion continued with the smell of barbecue drifting from the smoking grill and children's laughter echoing across the fields. But at our picnic table, everything had gone silent. "I'm Hudson Carter, 28 years old, and this farm isn't just property to me. It's every memory I have of love and belonging. When I was 8 years old, my parents died in a car accident on Highway 43 during a winter storm. Grandma Dorothy didn't hesitate. She took me in, raised me in this very farmhouse, taught me what it meant to belong somewhere. I spent every weekend and every summer learning this land. Grandma taught me to drive the tractor when I was 12, my feet barely reaching the pedals. We'd ride out to the north field at dawn, and she'd tell me stories about my grandfather, about how they'd built this place from nothing. I helped birth calves in the barn during spring, my hands shaking the first time but growing steady under her patient guidance. We fixed fences together in the blazing heat of July, and she'd pack us sandwiches with too much mustard, just the way I liked them. When Grandma Dorothy died 6 months ago, something broke inside me. The funeral was packed with people from 3 counties over. Everyone loved her. She'd helped raise half the kids in town at some point, always had her door open, always had something cooking on the stove. After the funeral, Uncle Greg stepped up immediately. He was her oldest son, always wore expensive suits despite never holding down a steady job, always talked about his business ventures that never quite panned out. He announced he was the executor of her estate and the heir to everything. The family accepted it without question, because Greg had a way of taking charge, of making himself seem important and knowledgeable. Nobody questioned him. Nobody except me, but I had an advantage nobody knew about. I work as a county land surveyor. 5 days a week, I process deeds, survey property lines, and maintain records at the county recorder's office. 3 weeks ago, I was handling routine deed transfers when something caught my eye. A property identification number looked familiar. It was Grandma's farm. Curious, I pulled the full chain of title going back 40 years. What I found made my hands shake. 5 years ago, Grandma Dorothy had quietly transferred the deed. The current legal owner, listed in black and white in the official county records, was Hudson James Carter, me, in a living trust. I made copies of everything, filed them carefully in a folder, brought them to the reunion today because I knew, somehow I just knew, that Greg was going to make his move. Now, at the picnic table, Greg snatched the papers from my hands, his face turning red. His wife Diane rushed over, her high heels sinking into the grass. "What's wrong? Greg, what is it?" Greg stammered, his usual confidence cracking. "These are fake. He forged these. Hudson works at the recorder's office. He could have made anything." I stayed calm, even though my heart was racing. "I pulled those directly from the county records this morning. You can verify them yourself. The recording date is March 15th, 5 years ago. Document number 874321. It's all public record." My cousin Brandon, Greg's son, pushed his way to the table. He was 32, worked construction, and had always looked down on me for having a desk job. "You're lying. You manipulated an old woman. That's elder abuse." Aunt Martha started crying, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "Hudson, how could you? After everything Dorothy did for you, you'd dishonor her memory like this." Uncle Phil, Martha's husband, shook his head in disgust. "We trusted you. We thought you were different." I tried to explain. "Grandma Dorothy came to me 5 years ago. She made me promise to keep it secret. She had her reasons, Reasons?" Greg's voice rose to a shout. The only reason is you conned her. You took advantage of her. Then Greg walked to his truck, a massive silver pickup that cost more than I made in a year. He came back holding a manila envelope. With shaking hands, he pulled out a document and slammed it on the table. This is her will. Dated 2 years ago. It leaves everything to me. Everything. This supersedes any deed transfer. I'll challenge it in probate court, and I'll tie this property up in legal battles for years if I have to. You'll spend every penny you have on lawyers, Hudson, and you'll lose. I picked up the will. It looked legitimate, properly notarized. Grandma's signature at the bottom, shaky but recognizable. My stomach dropped. Had she changed her mind? Had I misunderstood something? The family turned on me completely. Cousin Jessica called me greedy. Uncle Phil said I was no better than a common thief. Even my girlfriend Sarah, who'd come with me to the reunion, stood apart from me, her arms crossed, her expression uncertain. You need to leave, Greg said, his voice cold and final. This is family property, and you're not welcome here anymore. I felt the world tilting. These people, this family, they were all I had left, and they were casting me out without even listening. I walked toward my truck, my legs feeling numb. The sound of the reunion continued behind me. Someone turned the music up. Life went on, as if nothing had happened. But as I reached my truck, I heard footsteps behind me. My cousin Emma, just 16 years old, ran up to me. She looked around nervously, making sure nobody was watching. Hudson, wait, she whispered. I remember something. 2 years ago, Grandma Dorothy came to our house. She was really upset. Uncle Greg had been there earlier with some papers. Mom rushed me out of the room before I could hear what they were talking about. But Grandma kept saying something wasn't right. She looked scared. Emma pressed a piece of paper into my hand. This is Mrs. Patterson's number. She's Grandma's neighbor. She might know something. I'm sorry everyone's being so awful to you. I squeezed Emma's hand, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She ran back to the reunion before anyone noticed she'd talked to me. I sat in my truck, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching through the dusty windshield as my family celebrated without me. The farm stretched out before me, fields of corn and soybeans swaying in the summer breeze. The farmhouse where I'd grown up sat solid and white in the distance, the porch where Grandma and I used to shell peas on Sunday afternoons. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. I can't be with someone who would steal from family. Everyone in town will hear about this. We're done. I stared at the message, feeling something break inside my chest. In the span of 2 hours, I'd lost my family, my girlfriend, and apparently my reputation. In a small town like ours, where everyone knew everyone, this kind of accusation spread like wildfire. I was about to lose everything. I couldn't bring myself to drive away immediately. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, watching the reunion through my rearview mirror. Brandon threw a football with some of the younger cousins. Aunt Martha served potato salad from the same ceramic bowl Grandma had used for 30 years. Uncle Phil manned the grill, flipping burgers. Everything looked normal, like the world hadn't just collapsed. Finally, I started the engine and drove to Mrs. Patterson's house. She lived a quarter-mile down the road, in a tidy blue cottage with flower boxes in every window. I'd known her my entire life. She'd been Grandma's best friend for over 40 years. Mrs. Patterson answered the door in her gardening apron, her white hair pulled back in a bun. Her face lit up when she saw me, then immediately filled with concern. Hudson, sweetheart, come in. You look terrible. What's happened? Inside her kitchen, surrounded by the smell of fresh baked bread, I told her everything. She listened carefully, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of tea. When I finished, she nodded slowly. I was wondering when this would come to light. Hudson, I need to tell you what I saw 2 years ago. Mrs. Patterson explained that she'd been visiting the farm daily when Grandma Dorothy was recovering from pneumonia. One afternoon, Greg arrived with a man in a suit, a lawyer from the city. Mrs. Patterson was in the kitchen making soup when she heard raised voices from the living room. Your grandmother was weak, confused from the medication. I heard Greg telling her these were just updates to beneficiary forms, nothing important. But Dorothy was so out of it, Hudson. She could barely hold the pen. I should have said something, but Greg gave me such a look, told me it was private family business. After Greg left, Dorothy became agitated. She kept saying something wasn't right, that Greg had pressured her, that the papers didn't look like simple forms. Mrs. Patterson helped her call her own attorney, a man named Harold Brennan, a week later when Dorothy was feeling stronger. Harold came out to the farm right away. He reviewed what Dorothy had signed, and her face just crumpled. She'd signed a new will, Hudson. It replaced all her previous arrangements. She was horrified, but Harold assured her that the deed transfer to you was still valid. He said the deed took precedence because it was already recorded. Why didn't she tell me? I asked, my voice breaking. Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. She was afraid of Greg. He'd been verbally abusive for years, always calling her when he needed money, always making threats. He told her he'd put her in a nursing home if she didn't cooperate. She was scared, honey. She was old and sick, and scared of her own son. Mrs. Patterson gave me Harold Brennan's phone number. I called him immediately, sitting in my truck in her driveway, but got his voicemail. I left an urgent message explaining who I was and what had happened. The sun was setting as I drove back to my apartment in town. I lived in a small second-floor walk-through above the hardware store on Main Street. It wasn't much, but it was mine, or at least, it had been. My landlord, Mr. Kowalski, was waiting by the outside stairs. He twisted his cap in his hands, looking uncomfortable. Hudson, I need to talk to you. Your uncle called me today. He said some things, made some accusations about fraud. Now, I don't know what's true and what's not, but I can't have that kind of trouble associated with my property. I'm going to need you to move out by the end of the month. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. Mr. Kowalski, I've paid rent on time for 3 years. I've never caused any problems. I know, son, and I'm sorry. But this is a small town. Reputation matters. Until you get this sorted out, I just can't risk it. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, each step feeling like it took all my energy. Inside, I collapsed on the couch. My phone kept buzzing with messages. I finally looked. Texts from former friends, all variations of the same theme: disappointment, accusation, judgment. Sarah had apparently told everyone her version of events. The narrative was set. Hudson Carter had manipulated his sick grandmother and stolen the family farm. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Grandma Dorothy, trying to remember the day she'd transferred the deed. I'd been 23, working my first year at the county office. She'd asked me to come to the farm, said she had something important to discuss. We'd sat on the porch with glasses of sweet tea. She'd held my hand and told me she loved me more than anything in the world. She said the farm was my inheritance, that she'd already made the arrangements, but I couldn't tell anyone. Not yet. She made me promise. I'd asked why all the secrecy. She'd just smiled sadly and said, "Some things are complicated, sweetheart. Trust that I know what I'm doing." Now, lying alone in my apartment, facing the loss of everything, I finally understood. She'd been protecting the farm from Greg. She'd known what he was, what he'd do. My phone rang at 6 in the morning. Harold Brennan, attorney at law. "Hudson, I got your message. I'm glad you called. We need to talk about your grandmother's wishes and what we're up against." Harold Brennan met me at a diner on the edge of town at 7 in the morning. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He ordered coffee and got straight to business. "Your grandmother was one of the smartest, most determined women I've ever known. When she came to me 5 years ago, she knew exactly what she wanted. She'd discovered that Greg had been stealing from her." I set down my coffee cup. Stealing? Forging checks, taking out loans against the farm without her knowledge. She found out when the bank called about a defaulted loan. She was devastated. This was her own son, but she was also practical. She knew she couldn't let him destroy what she and your grandfather had built. Harold pulled out a thick file from his briefcase. "She set up a living trust with you as the beneficiary. The deed transfer was ironclad, properly executed, and recorded with the county. That's your protection, Hudson. You're the legal owner of that property. But what about the will Greg showed everyone?" Harold's expression darkened. That will is technically valid. He did bring Dorothy papers to sign when she was sick. She signed them, not understanding fully what they were. But here's the thing about property law. A deed transfer that's already recorded takes precedence over a will. The will can distribute personal property, bank accounts, things like that. But the farm itself? That's already yours. He can't will away property he doesn't own. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by anger. So he knew. He knew he couldn't legally sell the farm, but he announced it anyway to turn the family against me. Greg's gambling debts are substantial. He needs that farm money desperately. My guess is he's hoping to pressure you into signing over your rights, or at least scare you enough that you'll agree to sell and split the proceeds. Harold leaned forward. Hudson, you need to take physical possession of that property immediately. Move on to the farm. Establish that you're the owner and residents. That will make it much harder for Greg to contest anything. I drove to the farm that afternoon, my truck loaded with basic supplies. But when I arrived, I found that all the locks had been changed. I couldn't get into the house, the barn, or any of the outbuildings. I was standing on the porch trying to figure out what to do when Greg's truck pulled up the long driveway. He and Brandon got out, both of them walking toward me with aggressive strides. "Get off this property," Greg said. "You're trespassing. I'm the legal owner. You're the one trespassing. You've got forged papers. Real courts will sort this out. Until then, you need to leave." I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff's department. Deputy Collins, a man I'd gone to high school with, arrived within 20 minutes. I showed him my deed paperwork, the county records, everything Harold had given me. Deputy Collins reviewed it all carefully, then turned to Greg. "Mr. Harding, these documents show Mr. Carter is the legal property owner. You're going to need to vacate the premises within 24 hours, or I'll have to arrest you for trespassing." Greg's face turned purple with rage. "This is insane. I'm her son. He's nothing. He conned her. Can't you see that? What I see is legal documentation. If you want to contest ownership, you'll need to do that through the courts. But right now, this man has the deed. The property is his." Brandon stepped forward, his fists clenched. "This is such garbage. You're really going to throw us out?" Deputy Collins put his hand on his belt, near his radio. "I'm going to enforce the law. You have 24 hours. After they left, I asked Deputy Collins to stay while I checked the property. What I found made my heart sink. Greg had already sold the tractor, the one Grandma and I used to ride together. The hay baler was gone. Several pieces of equipment that had been in the barn had vanished. Inside the house, Grandma's personal belongings were cleared out. "Can he do this?" I asked Deputy Collins. "Just take and sell things?" If he claimed he was executor, he might have thought he had the right. But if those items were part of the property, and the property is yours, that's theft. You'll need to document everything, and potentially file charges. After Deputy Collins left, I walked through the empty house. The furniture was mostly still there, but personal items were gone. Photos, dishes, Grandma's sewing box, everything that made the house feel like home. In Grandma's bedroom, I found her dresser drawers hanging open. Someone had gone through everything hastily. The frame around the mirror was cracked. I started to close the drawers when I noticed something. The bottom drawer didn't sit quite right. I pulled it all the way out and looked underneath. Taped to the bottom was a manila envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter in Grandma's careful cursive, addressed to me and dated 1 month before she died. "My dearest Hudson," it began, "if you're reading this, then you've learned the truth about the farm, and probably about Greg too. I'm so sorry to burden you with this, sweetheart. You deserve better than family drama and legal battles. But I knew you'd fight for what's right, because that's who you are. That's who I raised you to be." The letter went on to explain everything. How Greg had been stealing from her for years. How she'd discovered loans in her name she never authorized. How he'd forged her signature on checks. How terrified she'd been when she confronted him, and he'd threatened to have her declared incompetent and institutionalized. "I couldn't bring myself to press charges against my own son," she wrote. "Maybe that makes me weak. Maybe that makes me a bad mother to you, because I should have protected you from this mess. but I couldn't send him to prison. So instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I put the farm in your name, where I knew it would be safe. The letter included details about a safe deposit box at First National Bank, box number 317. The key was in the envelope. Inside the box, you'll find evidence of everything Greg did. Bank statements, forged documents, loan papers. I documented it all with my attorney, Mr. Brennan. Use it if you must. But Hudson, please, if there's any way to resolve this without destroying Greg completely, try. He's still my son, broken as he is. And you're my grandson, the best thing that ever came from our family. Don't let his poison turn you bitter. I was still reading when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find Brandon standing in the doorway, holding a baseball bat. "You're not taking what belongs to my father," he said, his voice low and threatening. I held up my phone, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Deputy Collins is still outside. His patrol car is right in the driveway. You really want to do this?" Brandon's grip on the bat tightened, then loosened. His face twisted with conflict. He was angry, but he wasn't stupid. Finally, he lowered the bat and let it drop to the floor with a hollow thud. "This isn't over," he said. "My dad's been taking care of this place for years while you were off living your life in town. You don't deserve this farm. Your dad's been stealing from Grandma Dorothy for years," I said quietly. "And I can prove it." "You're lying." "I wish I was." Brandon stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out. I heard his truck start up and drive away, spitting gravel. I sat on Grandma's bed and finished reading her letter. The last paragraph made me cry. "You were the light of my life, Hudson. When your parents died and you came to live with me, I thought my heart would break from seeing your pain. But watching you grow up here, watching you learn to love this land and this life, that healed something in me. You gave me purpose when I thought I had none left. The farm is yours, because you're the only one who understands what it really means. It's not about money or property. It's about legacy, about roots, about knowing where you belong. Take care of it, sweetheart, and take care of yourself. All my love, always. Grandma Dorothy." I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Then I grabbed my sleeping bag from the truck and set up camp in the living room. If I was going to claim this property, I needed to live here. Deputy Collins had been right about that. The next morning, I went to First National Bank as soon as it opened. The bank manager, a woman named Patricia Reynolds who'd known Grandma for decades, led me to the safe deposit room. I showed her the key and my identification. "Dorothy told me you might come someday," Patricia said softly. "She was such a wonderful woman. I'm so sorry for your loss." Inside box 317, I found exactly what Grandma had described. Bank statements going back 8 years, showing irregular withdrawals, always for odd amounts. $900 here, $1,300 there, never quite big enough to trigger fraud alerts, but adding up to enormous sums over time. There were copies of checks with Grandma's signature that looked wrong. I'd seen her handwriting my entire life. These signatures were similar but not quite right. Someone had traced or forged them. Loan documents from 3 different banks. Loans against the farm's equity, totaling nearly $80,000, all with forged applications and signatures. The loans had defaulted, been sent to collections, then mysteriously paid off. And there was a USB drive. I asked Patricia if I could use a computer. In a private office, I plugged in the drive. A video file opened. The date stamp showed it was recorded 4 years ago. Grandma Dorothy sat in Harold Brennan's office, the attorney visible beside her. She looked directly at the camera and spoke clearly. "My name is Dorothy Marie Harding. I am 79 years old. I am of sound mind and body. I am making this statement of my own free will, with my attorney Harold Brennan present as witness. I want to state clearly for the record that I have transferred the deed of my farm property to my grandson Hudson James Carter, and that this transfer represents my true wishes. I am making this recording because my son Gregory Allen Harding has been stealing from me for years, and I fear he may contest my decisions after I'm gone." She went on to detail everything: the forged checks, the fraudulent loans, how she'd confronted Greg and he'd threatened her, how terrified she'd been but how determined to protect the farm. Her voice never wavered. She was clear, competent, and heartbreakingly honest. At the end, she looked into the camera and said, "Hudson, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and you're fighting for what's right. I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. Don't let Greg bully you. Stand your ground. This farm is yours because you're the only one who'll love it the way it deserves to be loved." I sat in that office and cried like I hadn't cried since her funeral. Patricia brought me tissues and a bottle of water and didn't say a word, just squeezed my shoulder and left me alone. I called Harold Brennan from the bank. "I found the safe deposit box. I have everything." "Good. That's very good. Hudson, you need to understand what this means. With this evidence, you could press criminal charges against Greg. The forged checks alone would be felony fraud. The loan documents could add up to decades in prison. I don't want to send him to prison. Grandma asked me not to destroy him completely. Then you have leverage. You can use this evidence to force him to back off, to withdraw all claims, to leave you and the farm alone. He won't have a choice." That afternoon I called a family meeting. I texted everyone, including Greg. "Mandatory family meeting at the farm tonight at 6. Everyone needs to be there. This ends tonight." I spent the afternoon cleaning the farmhouse, making it presentable. I set up folding chairs in the living room. I made coffee and put out cookies, the way Grandma always did when we had company. People started arriving at 5:45. Aunt Martha came with Uncle Phil, Cousin Jessica, and her husband. Emma came with her parents. Others trickled in, curious, uncertain. They all looked at me warily, like I was a stranger. Greg arrived last, at 6:15, making an entrance. But he wasn't alone. He brought a man in an expensive suit and a younger guy carrying a briefcase. Behind them was someone I didn't recognize at first, then realized was Tom Westfield, a local real estate developer known for buying up farmland and building subdivisions. Greg smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "Hudson, I appreciate you calling this meeting. Saved me the trouble. I'd like everyone to meet Carl Morrison. He's a real estate attorney. And this is Tom Westfield, who's purchasing the farm." My stomach dropped. "The farm's not for sale." "Actually, it is." "Carl, explain." The attorney opened his briefcase and pulled out documents. "We've discovered a cloud on the title. There's an outstanding property tax lien from 1998 for $200 that was never properly cleared. According to state law, any deed transfer that occurs while a lien is active is potentially voidable. This creates a legal gray area that could take years to resolve in court." Tom Westfield stepped forward. "I've already paid Mr. Harding a non-refundable deposit of $50,000 to secure the purchase. We'll be moving forward with closing in 2 weeks, regardless of any title disputes. Those can be resolved in litigation after the sale." The room erupted. Uncle Phil started asking questions. Aunt Martha looked confused. Emma stared at her father in horror. I felt the room spinning. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to think clearly. Greg was watching me with a triumphant smirk. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd found the perfect loophole to invalidate everything. "Can I see the tax lien documentation?" I asked calmly. Carl Morrison looked surprised by my composure but handed over the papers. I studied them carefully. Property identification number, legal description, tax year 1998. Amount owed, $200 plus interest. Then I noticed something. The parcel number was wrong. It was off by 1 digit in the sequence. I pulled out my phone and opened the county GIS mapping system, something I used every day at work. I typed in the parcel number from the tax lien and pulled up the property map. "This lien doesn't apply to Grandma's farm," I said, turning my phone so everyone could see. "This is for the property next door, the old Miller place. See? The parcel number is 347982. Grandma's farm is 347983. Someone made an error in the records, but it's clearly not this property." Carl Morrison's face went pale. He grabbed the papers back and checked them himself, then pulled out his own laptop. After a few minutes of frantic typing, he looked at Tom Westfield and shook his head. "He's right. The lien applies to the adjacent property. There's no cloud on this title. Tom Westfield's expression turned cold. He faced Greg. You told me there was a legitimate title defect. You assured me this sale would go through. I gave you $50,000. It's a simple mistake, Greg stammered. We can find another issue, we can. I want my money back. Now. I don't have it. What do you mean you don't have it? Greg's face was sweating. I had expenses, debts to pay. It's temporarily tied up, but I can get it back to you within. You spent my deposit? Tom's voice rose. That's fraud. That's criminal fraud. The developer turned to his attorney. Carl, I want to file charges immediately, and I want a lien placed on any property this man owns. He doesn't own this property, I said quietly. I do, and I'm not selling. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at me. I pulled out the USB drive. I need everyone to see something. I set up my laptop and connected it to the television Grandma used to watch her morning news shows. The video of Dorothy began to play. Everyone watched in stunned silence as Grandma explained everything. The theft, the forgery, the threats, her decision to protect the farm by transferring it to me. When the video ended, Aunt Martha was crying. Uncle Phil had his head in his hands. Emma looked at her father with tears streaming down her face. Lies, Greg said desperately. She was old, confused. He probably coached her to say those things. I pulled out the bank statements, the forged checks, the loan documents. I spread them across the coffee table. This is evidence of felony fraud. Multiple counts. The total amount stolen is over $80,000. With the forged loan documents, we're probably looking at 20 years in prison. Brandon stood up. Dad, is this true? Greg couldn't meet his son's eyes. Is it true? Brandon shouted. I borrowed some money, Greg said weakly. I always meant to pay it back. The gambling, it was going to turn around. I just needed. You stole from Grandma? Brandon's voice broke. While she was sick? While she was dying? Aunt Martha stood up, her voice shaking with rage. Gregory, how could you? Mother trusted you. We all trusted you. Uncle Phil pointed at the door. Get out. You're no nephew of mine. You're no family of mine. Greg looked around the room at the faces of his family, all of them filled with disgust and betrayal. Then he looked at me. What do you want? He asked, his voice hollow. Sit down, I said. All of you. We're going to settle this right now. Everyone Saturday. The room was quiet except for Martha's quiet crying. I took a deep breath. Grandma Dorothy asked me, in her letter, to try not to destroy you completely, Greg. She said you were still her son, broken as you are. I don't understand that kind of love, honestly. If I were her, I'd have pressed charges years ago. But she loved you despite everything, and she asked me to show mercy if I could. I looked around the room. So here's what's going to happen. Greg, you're going to do 3 things. First, you're going to apologize to this family and withdraw all legal challenges to my ownership of the farm. You're going to sign whatever documents Harold Brennan draws up, making it absolutely clear that you have no claim to this property. Greg nodded slowly, defeated. Second, you're going to set up a repayment plan for the $80,000 you stole. Not to me, to charity. You'll make monthly payments to the local food bank in Grandma Dorothy's name. Harold will oversee it to make sure you follow through. I don't have that kind of money, Greg protested. Then you'll get a job and work for it. You'll sell your truck. You'll downsize your life. You'll do whatever it takes. Because the alternative is I go to the police with all this evidence and you go to prison. Greg's hands were shaking. What's the third thing? You're going to get help for your gambling addiction. Real help. Counseling, support groups, whatever it takes. Because this ends now. You're not going to do this to another person, another family member, ever again. I looked at Brandon. Your dad's going to need support. Real support. Not enabling, but actual help getting better. Can you do that? Brandon looked at his father with a complicated expression of anger and heartbreak, and something that might have been love buried deep underneath. I don't know, but I'll try. I turned to the rest of the family. The farm is staying in our family. It's not going to be sold or developed. I'm going to live here and convert it into a community farm. Local families can come learn about sustainable agriculture. about where their food comes from. Kids can have the same experience I had growing up here. We'll run educational programs on weekends. It'll be called Dorothy's Legacy. Emma spoke up, her voice small. Can I help? I'm good with kids. I could run the youth programs. I'd love that, I said, feeling something warm spread through my chest. Aunt Martha stood up and crossed the room. She wrapped her arms around me. I'm so sorry, Hudson. I'm so sorry we didn't believe you. Dorothy raised you right. You're more family than any of us deserve. One by one, other family members came to apologize, to hug me, to promise to help with the community farm project. Uncle Phil shook my hand and said he'd donate supplies. Jessica's husband, who owned a construction company, offered to help repair the barn. Greg sat alone in the corner, diminished, broken. Brandon sat beside him eventually, not speaking, just sitting there. Tom Westfield and his attorney left, disgusted. As Tom walked out, he turned back. For what it's worth, your grandmother would be proud of you. What you're doing with this place, that's what land should be used for, not subdivisions. Keep fighting the good fight. As the family meeting broke up and people began to leave, Sarah appeared in the doorway. I hadn't even known she'd come. She approached me hesitantly. Hudson, I heard about the video. I heard what really happened. I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. Can we talk? Can we try again? I looked at her, this woman I'd thought I loved. I remembered how quickly she'd abandoned me, how easily she'd believed the worst. I thought about who I wanted beside me in the hard times, not just the easy ones. Sarah, I appreciate you coming, but I think we both know it wouldn't work. I need someone who believes in me, even when things look bad. I need someone who stands with me, not runs away. I'm grateful you left when you did, actually. It showed me what I really need in my life. Her face fell. She nodded and left without another word. Emma appeared at my side and high-fived me. That was amazing. Did you see her face? I laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in days. I saw it. You're going to be okay, Hudson. Better than okay. I looked around the farmhouse, at the family that remained, at the possibilities ahead. Yeah, I said. I think I am. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork and planning. Harold Brennan drew up documents for Greg to sign, officially renouncing any claim to the farm and establishing the repayment plan. Greg signed everything without protest, his signature shaky, nothing like the confident man who'd stood at the family reunion and announced he was selling the farm. Brandon came by the farm 3 days later. He stood on the porch looking uncomfortable, his hands shoved in his jacket pockets. Can we talk? He asked. We sat on the porch steps, the same spot where Grandma and I had shelled peas and talked about life. The fall air was crisp, leaves turning gold and red across the property. I'm sorry, Brandon said. I was terrible to you. I believed my dad without question. I should have known better. He's been lying to our family for years, and I just kept making excuses for him. It's hard to see the truth about people we love, I said. Yeah. Brandon was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking. What you said about the community farm, about teaching kids about agriculture, that's really cool. I work construction, but I grew up on this farm too, summers at least. I remember Grandma teaching me about the land. If you need help building anything, fixing up the barn, whatever, I'd like to be part of it. You want to help? I want to do something good, something that would make Grandma proud, something that's not about my dad's mess. He looked at me. Give me a chance to prove I'm not like him. I stuck out my hand. Partners? Brandon shook it, his grip firm. Partners. Over the next week, the farm transformed. Uncle Phil brought lumber for repairs. Brandon and his construction crew rebuilt the barn doors that had been falling apart for years. Jessica organized a work party where 24 family members showed up to paint the farmhouse, clean out the outbuildings, and plant a memorial garden for Grandma Dorothy. Emma threw herself into planning the youth education program. She created a curriculum for teaching kids about planting, harvesting, animal care, and environmental stewardship. She designed flyers and posted them at the library, the community center, and local schools. Aunt Martha took charge of the community outreach. She contacted local families, especially those who couldn't afford fresh produce, and set up a program where they could work a few hours on the farm in exchange for vegetables. Uncle Phil built raised garden beds specifically for this program. Mrs. Patterson stopped by weekly, always bringing food and stories about Grandma Dorothy. She'd sit on the porch with me in the evenings, and we'd watch the sun set over the fields. "You're doing something wonderful here," she said one evening. Dorothy would be so proud. She always said this land had a purpose beyond just existing. She said it was meant to teach people, to heal people. You're making that happen. 6 weeks after the family meeting, we held the grand opening of Dorothy's Legacy Community Farm. 70 people showed up. Families with young children, teenagers from the local high school looking for volunteer hours, elderly folks who remembered farming from their own childhoods. I gave a short speech, standing in the same spot where Greg had announced he was selling the farm. My grandmother believed land was more than property. She believed it was responsibility, heritage, and hope. She taught me that when you have something precious, you don't hoard it, you share it, you use it to make your community stronger. Emma led the first youth group through the farm, teaching 15 children how to identify different types of soil and why crop rotation mattered. Their excitement was infectious. They ran through the fields with the kind of joy I remembered feeling at their age. Brandon gave tours of the barn he'd rebuilt, explaining the construction process and letting kids try hammering nails into scrap wood under his supervision. Uncle Phil demonstrated the proper way to build a scarecrow, much to the children's delight. Aunt Martha served refreshments from long tables set up under the oak trees where, just a few months ago, Greg had tried to destroy everything. Now those same trees shaded a celebration of community and renewal. Greg wasn't there. He'd moved into a small apartment in town, started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times a week, and taken a job at the hardware store. Mr. Kowalski, my former landlord, had hired him despite everything, saying everyone deserved a second chance. Greg made his first charity payment to the food bank the week before, with Harold Brennan overseeing the transaction. Brandon told me his dad was struggling but trying. He asks about the farm sometimes. I tell him what we're doing here. I think it hurts him, knowing what he almost destroyed. But maybe that's good. Maybe he needs to hurt for a while. Tell him he can visit sometime, I said. Not yet, but eventually, if he keeps getting better. Brandon looked surprised. Really? After everything? Grandma asked me to show mercy if I could. I'm trying to honor that. Doesn't mean I trust him, doesn't mean I forget, but maybe someday we can rebuild something. As the sun set on the grand opening, I found myself standing alone by Grandma's memorial garden. Emma and the youth group had planted sunflowers there, Grandma's favorite. In the center was a simple stone marker, Dorothy Marie Harding, teacher, gardener, grandmother. She showed us how to grow. I felt a presence beside me and turned to find Deputy Collins, still in uniform. Wanted to stop by and see what you've done with the place, he said. Heard you turned it into something special. Trying to. We'll see if it lasts. It'll last. You know why? Because it's not about you. It's about community. Things that are bigger than one person. Those are the things that endure. After everyone left, I walked the property boundary line, something I did most evenings. 200 acres of rolling fields, forests, and creek bottom. Every step was a memory. The spot where I learned to fish. The tree I fell out of when I was 10 and broke my arm. The field where Grandma and I watched meteor showers on August nights. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. 15 families signed up for next week's program. We're going to need more supplies. This is going to be amazing. Another text from Brandon. Starting work on the equipment shed tomorrow. Dad asked if he could help. I told him I'd ask you. I thought about it for a long moment, then replied, tell him yes, but he works under your supervision, and he doesn't handle money or paperwork. Brandon's response was immediate. Thanks, Hudson. You're a better man than I would be. I sat on the porch as night fell completely, the farm settling into its evening sounds. Crickets chirping, the distant call of an owl, wind rustling through cornstalks. These were the sounds of home. I thought about Grandma Dorothy, about her impossible choice between protecting what she loved and protecting her son, about how she'd found a way to do both, in her own way. She'd saved the farm by giving it to me, but she'd also saved Greg from the worst of his consequences by making me promise to show mercy. It was a burden I hadn't asked for, but sitting there on that porch, watching fireflies dance over the fields, I realized it was also a gift. She'd trusted me with more than property. She'd trusted me with the family's future, with the possibility of healing and redemption. I pulled out my phone and opened my photos, finding one from 5 years ago. Grandma and I standing in front of the farmhouse, her arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling. She'd insisted on taking it the day she transferred the deed, though I hadn't understood why at the time. Now I did. She'd been documenting the moment when she passed the legacy forward, when she chose hope over fear, when she decided to trust in the goodness she'd cultivated in me. "I'm trying, Grandma," I whispered to the photo. "I'm trying to be worthy of what you gave me." The wind picked up, warm and gentle, carrying the smell of growing things, and I could have sworn I heard her voice, just for a moment, saying what she always said when I was young and struggling with something hard. "You've got this, sweetheart. You've always had this." 3 months after that grand opening, Dorothy's Legacy Community Farm had become a fixture in our town. Every Saturday, families arrived to work in the gardens, learn about sustainable farming, and connect with the land. The program had expanded beyond anything I'd imagined. I stood at my kitchen window one Saturday morning, watching the early arrivals pull into the gravel parking area Brandon had built. The same kitchen where Grandma had taught me to make biscuits from scratch, where we'd planned gardens and talked about everything from school problems to life dreams. Emma had transformed the youth program into something remarkable. She ran 4 different age groups now, from kindergartners learning about seeds and soil to high school students studying environmental science. The local community college had reached out about creating an internship program. 2 of Emma's students had told their parents they wanted to study agriculture in college. Brandon's construction skills had rebuilt not just the barn but also added a covered pavilion where families could gather during rain. He'd installed a rainwater collection system and built a chicken coop where kids could learn about animal husbandry. His relationship with his father remained complicated, but they were talking. Greg showed up to work most Saturdays, always quiet, always on the edges, trying to earn back something he knew he could never fully restore. Aunt Martha had organized a farm-to-table dinner series where families cooked meals together using vegetables they'd harvested. Uncle Phil taught tool safety and basic carpentry. Jessica ran a composting and recycling education program. The farm had become exactly what Grandma Dorothy had envisioned, a place that taught people not just about farming but about community, responsibility, and connection. Mrs. Patterson still visited every Sunday. We'd have tea on the porch, and she'd share stories about Grandma, keeping her memory alive. "You know," she said one afternoon, "Dorothy used to say that land remembers. It remembers the hands that worked it, the love that was poured into it. This farm remembers her, Hudson. And now it'll remember you too, and all these families you're helping." My life had stabilized in ways I hadn't expected. The county investigation into Greg's fraud complaint had cleared me completely, and my supervisor had apologized personally. I'd received a promotion at work, a recognition of both my skills and my integrity. I'd moved into the farmhouse permanently, filling it with a mixture of Grandma's furniture and my own things, making it both a tribute to the past and a home for my future. I'd started dating someone new, a teacher named Claire, who volunteered at the farm on weekends. She'd shown up 6 weeks ago wanting to bring her class for a field trip, and we'd talked for 2 hours about education and agriculture and the importance of connecting kids with where their food came from. She was patient, kind, and believed in the mission of the farm. When things got hard, which they inevitably did, she stayed. She worked beside me. She didn't run. Greg made his charity payments every month without fail. The food bank had received over $6,000 so far in Dorothy's name. He'd been sober from gambling for 90 days, marked by a small ceremony at his support group that Brandon attended. The road to redemption was long and uncertain, but he was walking it. On the anniversary of Grandma Dorothy's passing, I organized a memorial celebration. Over 100 people came. We planted an orchard in her honor, 20 fruit trees that would feed the community for decades. Each family that had participated in the farm program planted a tree, and we attached small plaques with their names. Emma gave a speech about what the farm had taught her, how it had shown her that young people could make a difference, that age didn't matter when you had passion and purpose. She cried a little, which made me cry, which made half the audience cry. Brandon spoke about his grandmother's forgiveness, about second chances, about how the farm was helping him understand what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself. He looked at Greg while he spoke, and I saw his father wipe away tears. Aunt Martha read a poem Dorothy had written years ago, something she'd found in an old journal. It was about the seasons of life, about planting and harvesting, about how nothing was ever truly lost if it was given to the earth and to the next generation. As the sun set on that anniversary, I stood in the orchard we'd just planted and thought about inheritance. The word had meant something different to me a year ago. It had meant property, legal documents, ownership. Now I understood it meant something deeper. Grandma Dorothy's real inheritance wasn't the 200 acres or the farmhouse or even the equipment and livestock. Her inheritance was the lesson that land carries responsibility, that family means choosing to see the best in people even when they disappoint you, and that the greatest gift you can give is not something you own but something you share. She'd inherited this farm from her parents, who'd worked it through the Depression and 2 world wars. She'd tended it through her own struggles, through raising children and losing a husband and facing her own mortality. And she'd passed it to me not because I was entitled to it, but because she trusted I would understand what it was really for. It wasn't for profit or prestige, it was for teaching, for healing, for connecting people to something real and permanent in a world that felt increasingly temporary and disconnected. I thought about the day Greg had stood under these same trees and announced he was selling the farm because we didn't deserve it. In a way, he'd been right. Nobody deserves something like this. Legacy isn't about deserving. It's about accepting the responsibility that comes with the gift. Standing in that orchard, surrounded by the community we'd built, I finally understood what Grandma had been trying to teach me my whole life. The greatest inheritances aren't the things we receive, but the things we choose to do with them. Some people inherit wealth and hoard it. Some inherit land and exploit it. Some inherit knowledge and keep it to themselves. But the people who truly honor their inheritances are the ones who transform them into something bigger, who use what they've been given to lift up others. I'd inherited a farm. But what I'd really inherited was a choice. To be bitter about the battle I'd had to fight, or to be grateful for what the battle had taught me. To punish Greg forever, or to show the kind of mercy Grandma had asked for. To keep the farm as my private sanctuary, or to open it as a community resource. Claire found me in the orchard as darkness fell. She took my hand and we walked back toward the farmhouse together, its windows glowing warm in the twilight. Through those windows I could see Emma and Brandon cleaning up from the celebration, Aunt Martha and Uncle Phil washing dishes, families gathering their children and their vegetables and their memories of a good day. "You okay?" Claire asked. "More than okay," I said. "I'm home." And I was. Not just physically, though the farmhouse was certainly my home, but I was home in a deeper sense. I'd found my place, my purpose, my understanding of who I was and what I was meant to do. Grandma Dorothy had given me more than land. She'd given me the blueprint for a meaningful life. Work hard, love deeply, fight for what's right, show mercy when you can. Plant things that will grow long after you're gone. Leave the world better than you found it. As I locked up the barn that night and took one last walk around the property, I stopped by her memorial garden. The sunflowers had gone to seed, their heavy heads bowed, ready to plant again next spring. The cycle continuing, the way it always had, the way it always would. "Thank you," I said to the memory of the woman who'd shaped me. "Thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for teaching me what really matters. Thank you for showing me that the best way to honor the past is to invest in the future." The wind rustled through the dried sunflower stalks, and I smiled. She'd always have the last word, even now. I walked back to the farmhouse where Claire waited on the porch, where the lights glowed warm, where my life was becoming something beautiful and purposeful. I thought about the families who'd come through the farm, the kids who'd learned to plant their first seeds, the teenagers who'd discovered a passion for environmental science, the adults who'd reconnected with the land their grandparents had farmed. This was Dorothy's legacy. Not property or wealth, but knowledge passed forward, community built strong, and love multiplied through service. And as I climbed the porch steps to start another evening in the home where I'd learned everything that mattered, I realized something profound. I'd spent months fighting to keep this farm because I thought I was protecting what Grandma had given me. But I'd been wrong. I wasn't protecting what she'd given me. I was becoming what she'd made me, and that was the greatest inheritance of all. The lesson was clear now, crystallized through struggle and victory. True legacy isn't about ownership or entitlement. It's about stewardship, protecting what matters for future generations, standing firm in your principles even when everyone doubts you, and understanding that the greatest victories come not from defeating others, but from staying true to what you know is right. Justice and peace come from fighting back with truth, not vengeance. Some inheritances are measured in acres and dollars, but the greatest inheritance is understanding what's worth fighting for and having the courage to protect it, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after. That's what Grandma Dorothy had given me. That's what I would pass forward, and that made every moment of the struggle worthwhile. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever had to stand alone to protect something you believed in? Have you ever been in a situation where everyone doubted you, but you knew in your heart you were right? What did you do? How did it turn out? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else who's facing their own difficult battle right now. If this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories and reminds us all that we're not alone in our struggles. And if you want to hear more stories about courage, family, and standing up for what's right, please subscribe to the channel. There are so many more stories to share, so many more lessons to learn together. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Maybe they're facing their own family battle. Maybe they're questioning whether integrity and truth really matter. Maybe they just need to be reminded that fighting for what's right, even when it's hard, even when you stand alone, is always worth it. Thank you for listening to Dorothy's story, and to mine. Thank you for being part of this community where we believe that truth wins, that courage matters, and that the greatest legacies are the ones we build together. Until next time, may you have the strength to stand for what's right, and the wisdom to know when mercy matters most. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.